So we've got a couple of fiddles on the couch here, and just curious what both of those, I guess, who played them, or do you ever play fiddle?
No, I try, but no. Wouldn't call it play, no.
So which fiddle do we have here right next to you?
Well, we know in his early days he learned to play fiddle. In fact, we got a World War I picture of him sitting on some steps with some guys and him playing the fiddle. Uh, this may be the fiddle he learned to play on right here. This was his Uncle Buck's fiddle. Uncle Buck was on his mama's side of the family. His name was Merritt Hoover. Everybody called him Uncle Buck. He played fiddle, and he was in the Civil War. Now, whether he got this after the Civil War, during or before, we don't know. It's an old fiddle, and I got it back years ago from one of my cousins. I remember this fiddle when I was a little kid growing up. We'd play up there, and my uncle had his own fiddle. My dad had his own fiddle. This fiddle was laying in one of the dresser drawers, and really knocked me out was on the back of it was this little design you'll see like mother of pearl or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would guess more than likely this is the fiddle that my dad learned to play, and probably my uncle, probably the same fiddle. And we got it restored. A good friend of ours named Benny Bennett, who was great at restoring fiddles, he restored it for us. And it's probably has no value other than sentimental. But I would guess that's the fiddle he learned to play on. This fiddle is the only fiddle I ever knew my dad to own, was this one. It's a Hop, Hopf. It's not a great fiddle. It's a good fiddle. Clyde said when they moved to Houston about 1946, for some reason whatever fiddle he was playing, traded it off here in Houston to get this fiddle. And probably, I don't know, 1946, 47, whatever. I don't know how the fiddle is. It's still playable. I still try to play it from time to time. It's the only fiddle I ever saw or heard my dad playing was this one. It was not used when they played with Jimmy Rogers. Who knows what happened. Seems like a lot of fiddle players go through, back in those days, a lot of fiddles. They'll either acquire other fiddles or trade one they have for another one. But this has a lot of value. It's the only fiddle I ever heard my daddy ever saw him play was this one. And it's still a good fiddle. But that's the history of the fiddles.
So as far as fiddle players, with your dad and Alvin, who other, I guess, fiddle players throughout the years were maybe not influential, but definitely people your dad either had in his band or people that he really admired?
Well, there's a lot of different fiddle players, but the main one would be Cliff Bruner. And Cliff shares the story that he lived in a little place called Pinehurst out past Tomball, and Daddy was older and I wouldn't say famous, but he went out there and played. And he took Cliff like under his arm and showed him a few things. Of course, Cliff was a flat out jazz swing fiddle player. Daddy was not. But Cliff always appreciated about my dad, and they knew each other and played together from time to time. Cliff did some of his songs. Cliff Bruner. And of course, the main one that came after that was my brother Clyde Brewer, and a phenomenal fiddle player. And Clyde copied Cliff Bruner's style. The two people that Clyde copied was the same two that Johnny Gimble said was his heroes, Cliff Bruner and J.R. Chatwell. Daddy knew J.R. real well. J.R. again is a swinging cat, man, on fiddle. J.R. was just a swinging fiddle player. Him and Cliff both. And those two, now they weren't influenced by my dad as far as their styles, but I think just some of the professionalism, how they carried themselves, at least Cliff said, Daddy was, in fact, there's a song that my dad did back in 36, not long after Cliff had left playing with Milton Brown, and Cliff played on several of my dad's records. And you can tell the difference when Cliff played. Another fiddle player that Daddy knew and used a lot was Leon Pappy Self, a great entertainer in his own right. And he and Pappy were good friends, played together a lot. And of course, there's many others I could mention, but I would say obviously Cliff, Clyde, by extension Jr. and some of those guys.
So earlier I panned over here. Are these the original cases, or are these
No,
just cases
they,
that have kind of
when
found their
Benny
home?
put Uncle Buck back together,
Okay.
he said he needs an old Uncle Buck looking fiddle case and gave us that one. This one we got some years later. Daddy's old fiddle case just fell apart, and we just got that. And I try to leave the fiddles out, because if you leave a fiddle in a case, it'll just fall apart after a while. As Clyde told me years ago, a fiddle needs to breathe.
So in we talked about the 30s, your dad was obviously transitioning, I guess, from the Jimmy Rogers era over towards more, I guess, towards a Western swing type of music, which, again, it wasn't something that was planned, but it obviously, that's kind of the direction it went.
Yeah.
So in the 40s, we know the United States got involved in a war, and they began doing, I guess, ship work down in Beaumont, I guess, was the hot spot to be for the bands. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your dad and some of the bands down there at that time.
He had several bands over the years, always Shelly Lee Alley and his Alley Cats. He got out of the bed business for a little while and moved to Beaumont because he had a brother there named Ray and his wife, and he was staying with them. And because he had a name, people knew him. He'd appear on different radio programs and that sort of thing. But as I was told, at Beaumont, because of World War II, there was all kind of work there. If you wanted to work, you could get there. And the dance places, they were open every night. You could play music every night. You could make a living at it. No matter if it was a good band or a bad band, it didn't matter, because these people are looking for a place to go and hear music and dance to have a good time. So the places were open all the time, and you could make good money. So that's where he gravitated to, was Beaumont.
I guess around that time, we know that he'd been married, I guess, 3 times before he met his fourth wife, his last wife, which was your mom. And I guess did they meet out in Beaumont, or where did they meet?
Yeah, through my brother Clyde. Clyde was about 13 years old. They moved to Beaumont from him and his dad and my mom from Luling, Texas, to work. And he heard a little group on the radio called Pats and the Buckaroos, and Clyde was playing mandolin and guitar. And Clyde said, I could play with them. So he went out and auditioned, and they hired him. And so they began to talk about this Friday night at Playland Park. We got a special guest, radio performer, played with Jimmy Rogers, Shelly Lee Alley. And Clyde said, man, I got to meet this guy. And sure enough, he came out, did his own little act, wore a little fedora hat. Clyde said, very good. And he met Clyde for the first time. He recognized he had talent and told Clyde, he says, look, I'm getting ready to reform my band, the Alley Cats. Would you like to be on the band? And Clyde, man, would I? So you want me to go from there?